have auspiciousness and causes of success. May you have the confidence to always do your best. May you take no effort in your being generous, sharing what you can, nothing more, nothing less. May you know the meaning of the word happiness. May you always lead from the beating in your chest. May you be treated like an esteemed guest. May you get to rest, may you catch your breath. May the best of your todays be the worst of your tomorrows. Whoa. May the road less paved be the road that you follow. Whoa. Well, here's to the hearts that you're gonna break. Here's to the lives that you're gonna change. Here's to the infinite possible ways to love you. I want you to have it. Here's to the good times we're gonna have. You don't need money, you got a free pass. Here's to the fact that I'll be sad without you. I want you to have it all. I want you to have it all. I want you to have it. I want you to have it all. May you be as fascinating as a slap bracelet. May you keep the chaos and the clutter off your desk. May you have unquestionable health and less stress. Having no possessions, though immeasurable wealth. May you get a gold star on your next test. May your educated guesses always be correct. And may you win prizes shining like diamonds. May you really own it each moment to the next. May the best of your todays be the worst of your tomorrows. Whoa. May the road less paved be the road that you follow. Whoa. Well, here's to the hearts that you're gonna break. Here's to the lives that you're gonna change. Here's to the infinite possible ways to love you. I want you to have it. Here's to the good times we're gonna have. You don't need money, you got a free pass. Here's to the fact that I'll be sad without you. I want you to have it all.
All right, welcome, everyone. So excited to have you all join. Let's do a tech test. So if you all could use the chat feature and use an emoji that describes how you're feeling in the moment right now. Please use an emoji to describe your emotion, how you're feeling in the moment. All right, loving them. Coming on in. So excited to have you all. Welcome. My name is Aaron Ross Green Sr. I have the privilege of serving as your department chief equity officer. I've been with the department it'll be 4 years in November, and we are in for a treat. Just want to share with you all that I have known our guest speaker, our facilitator for the next 2 days it'll be almost a couple of years, and we first met informally at Nashville. I'm not sure if you will remember, Jemai, but we crossed paths very quickly, and then over the years stayed in touch. But today is for all staff, from good intentions to genuine connection, inclusive leadership, and decision-making workshop. Next slide, please. As always, we want to hold true to our principles and our values, and we always start with land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that what is now Colorado includes the lands of the Ute, Arapaho, Cheyenne, Dene, Lakota, Apache, Puebloan nations, and many tribes, and that the sovereign tribal governments of the Ute, Mountain Ute, and the Southern Ute Indian tribes still reside in the state. These tribes are the original stewards of these natural areas. We want to take a moment to honor and respect these original stewards of the environment and their relationship with the land. The Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing, known as HCPF, commits to community engagement, policy development, ongoing education, and equity in procurement as we work to rectify the historic injustices that continue to impact our society today. I'll also put a link in the chat shortly where you can access the native land map and then our land and labor acknowledgement from the statewide equity office. Next slide, please. All right. So without further ado, just want to introduce our leader for the day and tomorrow, Jemai Aki Chapman, background in Medicaid. He's the former senior executive equity advisor for Wisconsin Division of Medicaid Services and senior program officer at the Center for Healthcare Strategies with experience working alongside teams in state Medicaid agencies over the past 15 plus years. He is the author and framework developer. Recently published the Evolve Your We From Courage to Connection in a Divided World and developed the Arrive framework, including the SLATE and Bridge methods we'll explore together today. Approaches that have been helpful to other state health agencies. So, with a warm HICPUF welcome, please show your appreciation and excitement for Jemai Aki Chapman.
Thank you, Aaron, so much. It looks like there was a raised hand, so I want to give an opportunity for that individual to um, say their piece.
I don't know if it's my piece. I'm sorry, it was me. This is Melissa Holgram. And I'm not seeing my emojis. So if I don't respond, I apologize. It looks like it's working for everyone else. I don't want to cause any hiccup. But that was me, and I apologize. So we can move forward. I may jump out and jump back in and see if that gives me the emojis. But I appreciate you, Amy, for calling me out and calling that out.
No worries. Well, first of all, oh, Monica, you have your hand raised. Wow, I was really concerned about the engagement, but it looks like that's not going to be a problem. Go ahead, Monica, your hand's raised. Monica Owens.
It might also be inadvertent. So
Sorry. It was my hand that was raised and Melissa took it for me, but I don't
Woo!
see my emojis either. So I was wanting to welcome you. So if I can't participate in that way because I'm not seeing mine's either. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much. And I just want to, first of all, acknowledge that I'm entering a space that you all have cultivated and developed over a number of years. And sometimes when an individual comes into that space, the energy changes. I'm hoping that the energy I'll add to the positive energy of your group. But I just want to thank you all for giving me the grace and the opportunity to speak to you today. It's been a pleasure knowing Aaron and all of the work that he's done. And I'm looking forward to the conversation today. I know that there are some typical norms that you all have when you have these group gatherings. And just quickly, if there are any norms that folks want to emphasize, if you can put those in the chat so that they can be recognized and discussed if needed, that would be great. Okay, okay, Grace, love it. Grace is going to be an important theme throughout today, so that's beautiful. Any more? All right. Acceptance. Love it. Same. Respect. Great. Patience. Empathy. Oh my gosh. You guys are doing wonderful. Curiosity. Love it. I think these are generosity with information and learning. I love it. I'm going to ask something of you all too, which is transparency, honesty, and active engagement in this work. There is a difference between being committed to something and being interested in something, right? And based on my conversations with Aaron, you all have a group of folks who are committed to this work. And so I'm going to ask you to kind of display that today with your engagement. I know it's a lot of us today, but display that with your engagement because, as someone told me a long time ago, what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. So, really looking forward to today. So, today, our journey follows really three powerful phases. We're going to take an active stance of curiosity about what empathy gaps we might be missing, and then understanding the difference between awareness and recognition. We're going to use a technique called slate, which will help us wipe the slate clean. Sorry for the pun, but it worked so beautifully. We're going to wipe our slate clean of the assumptions that prevent us from connecting with individuals. And you'll see as you dig into the work that it actually helps us connect to ourselves as well. And then we're going to learn about how to bridge pathways from resistance to cooperation. And by the end, you'll have tools that work both in your individual relationships and conversations, and then also your organizational change work. So the complete arrived framework, which is something that I've developed over several years, is awareness, recognition, reconnaissance, investigation, visualization, engineering and enactment, and deliberation. And this framework really helps organizations move from that committed or that interested space to the commitment space by really emphasizing the personal transformation first and that individual awareness and recognition. And then to somebody's point regarding the norms, using the grace that we give ourselves, because we know that we also cause trauma, using that same grace for other individuals. And I'll stop because I saw a hand. So whomever that was, please feel free to share.
I think that was me. I was just trying to access the link in the chat. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. So today we're going to be really focusing on this awareness and recognition piece because I really think it's the foundation of the work that we all do. There's a quote that's attributed to Aristotle that says, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." And when you go to the etymology of that word, know, and its Latin root, cognasco, there's several meanings, and one of them is examine and inquire. And the awareness and recognition piece is really about examining our own personal beliefs, where they come from, and what parts of those beliefs could be limiting our ability to connect with other people. And I call those limiting beliefs empathy gaps. So we're going to really dig into that today. One of the core components of this work is the understanding that our context shapes our reality. And what I mean by that is we are born into society, and some of us have a system that is set up and in place and is built for us. And so there's this inherent privilege that's provided to some folks. And then there's inherent privilege that's not provided to some folks. And I say that with a caveat because I want to, and this is important, recognize that myself as a Black man, Aaron as a Black man, and other folks with context that we don't normally associate with privilege. We actually do have privilege in certain situations and in certain things. And certainly there have been times in my life where I have caused trauma and I have caused harm while using that privilege. So just want to acknowledge that. And going back again to the grace piece, it's so important because I've forgiven myself for that. And since I've forgiven myself for that harm and trauma, I'm almost obligated, not almost, I am obligated to extend that same grace to other folks. And so when we talk about our context, we're talking about our social context, our professional context, where we live, our economic context, and our cultural context. And all of that contributes to the belief systems that we have and that we've come to know. And one of the other things that I like to teach is the belief systems that we have, we come into those honestly. So if I meet somebody and we have a difference of opinion about whatever politics, policy, sports, they've come into those beliefs honestly. Most people don't wake up in the morning and say, "Hey, my goal today is to harm X, Y, and Z group of individuals." Most people wake up and want to be a good human being. But because of our social context, the historical nature of our country, we grow up in these echo chambers that program us to be certain things and to believe certain things. And it's not good, bad, right, or wrong. It's just what is. And the nature of today's work is really to deconstruct that and to interrupt that programming and that conditioning and get some ownership of it, get some agency of it, um, and transform that into a bridge so that we can connect to folks who might have different social constructs than we do. So the critical insight here really is that your personal and professional context is the primary factor that determines your level of awareness and your level of recognition. The context that we live and work in within creates these blind spots that I call empathy gaps. And it's not because we're bad people, right? Uh, it's because these things have naturally made their way into our belief systems, and it's up to us really to interrupt that belief system and move to something greater where we can evolve our we. A connection to health policy might be something like we know or we are aware, for example, that there are unhoused people in Colorado, but we might have a meeting that the intention of the meeting or the objective of the meeting is to find solutions for unhoused people, but we don't recognize that we don't have any unhoused people in our meeting to actually speak to understand their perspective, their context, what they think works, what they think is um, how the system should work for them in order for them to not be unhoused. And that's really the difference between awareness and recognition. So I have a question for you, and you all can just put this right in the chat. My professional context makes it easy for me to blink, but I might not see when this creates barriers for others.
Oh, as they answer that first chat question, do you want me to launch the first poll?
Yes, please.
All right, coming up. As there's interactions in the chat, just to let you know, Jemai, we have 106 participants. We are at almost 50% participation in the poll. So keep them coming, guys.
Yeah, keep them coming. The chat is very insightful. I'm so excited to have this discussion. We have promote change, grow, speak up, critically think, anticipate problems, determine assistance, forecast the future, have a voice, manage, be patient, express my own thoughts and opinions, problem solve, freely express my opinions, learn. Listen to everyone. So imagine, right, those chats, those responses in the chat really speak to a gap. If in your professional context, it makes it easy for you, for example, to share your opinion, to have a voice, to learn, to grow, but that might create barriers for others. And by others, right, we can substitute others for an entire group of people. Maybe it's members, maybe it's our partners, maybe it's other business units, maybe it's the legislative office, maybe it's our HMOs or CCOs or ACOs. Um, you can kind of see how that could potentially create communication gaps, empathy gaps, anxiety, tension, etc. If you are already acknowledging that uh, the power of your context allows you to do certain things that might create barriers for others, and that's really important. I was when I was reading those chats, I was like, wow, this is really the folks are really thinking about that, and that this is awesome because it takes that curiosity again. That's one of those words that was mentioned in terms of norms to really move to the recognition phase to understand, okay, this might be creating a barrier. Now, what do I need to do so that this barrier can be mitigated, for example? And thanks, Aaron, for popping up the poll. It looks like folks have mostly answered in the 4 to 8 range, I would say, in terms of their comfortability recognizing when they might have an incomplete perception. And I guess that kind of lines up with the chat a bit. And hopefully, as we get through the day or this 90 minutes, that folks will hopefully see that change a bit in the positive direction. So, thank you all for participating in that. Did anyone want to speak about their blank and how it might create barriers for other folks? Go ahead, Gina.
Yeah, I can. I think for me, it's sometimes the ivory tower mentality, right? We are here to promulgate rules, and we don't always get to see how those rules affect others and
Mm,
how they will affect others.
mm. Yeah, that's a perfect example. I'm really interested in this understand the economically disadvantaged. That is an interesting. My context makes it easy for me to do that, but it might create barriers for others. I'm really interested in that. Sheila, would you be open to sharing your thoughts? And it's okay if you're not. I just thought that that was a really uh, interesting chat response because it's so true, right? We have all the data, and perhaps we don't understand necessarily. Right on, Sheila. When your technical difficulties are resolved, perhaps you can jump in. But it's interesting, right? We have surveys, we have focus groups, we have data to help us quote unquote understand the economically disadvantaged, but that still creates barriers. And what I was going, I have my own, and I'm sure Aaron and other folks probably have an idea about why that still creates barriers. But just really interested in what Sheila had to say. But if I had to guess, um, it would be we don't hear their stories. So we're not connecting our data, our quantitative data, to their stories. And perhaps there's questions that we're not asking that could help us make that connection. And we'll go over some of those magic questions later on. So thank you all for your participation in that chat question. So before and in the chat, I know Aaron put the folder with the pre-work documents for this workshop, where we ask folks to kind of think of a decision that they've recently made. Looking for a volunteer here to kind of share what that decision was. And then what I want us to do as a group is really kind of go through that and see how we can, or if we can recognize where empathy gaps might be in that decision process. Is there anyone willing to share a decision for our group analysis? Oh, okay. I think Nancy was first, so go ahead, Nancy.
Yeah, no, go ahead and come on camera. So this was from the pre-work, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So recent, in the last year, I was co-chair on our EDIA committee. And an important project to me was upgrading our anonymous feedback form for staff. I was on employee council before, and it was often used as a place to vent and not really a place to affect change. And so we've revised it, and it's now going through. I'm going to meet with leadership, and we're going to finalize it so that when people give us their feedback, they can also offer solutions, ask for specific people to look at it. They'll have all those options. They can still be anonymous, but we want it to be productive, and we want people to feel like the change is happening from what they've submitted. And it's not just a place to vent their frustration and anger. I think we all need to do that, but I think we need to find appropriate places for that. And so I'm excited that we'll have something, a tool where we can take people's ideas and make them happen.
That's awesome. And you kind of, it sounds like what happened is you caught yourself and you were like, wait a minute, we actually need to go to the people and have this discussion before we finalize this thing to make sure that this is going to be constructive exercise. So let's pretend that you haven't done that yet, right? The current version, who were the decision makers when that survey was being created?
The original version was created by employee council, so that is a council made up of employees. So similar to the community of practice team that I lead, it's also a group of employees representing everyone. So we did not poll everyone on what changes we should make. So maybe we need to consider that. But we did have a cross-section of employees who participated in reviewing and revising this tool so that it is more effective.
Understood. And did that group consult anyone in your organization or without?
Yes, so our executive sponsor is the Director of Human Resources. So she has been involved, as well as Dana Beatty, who works with Erin in EDIA. She is on our team as well. And then I meet with Erin and Dana to finalize the process.
Understood. Thank you for sharing that. In your analysis, was there any partner group in your organization or business unit that potentially would be affected by the outcome of this survey that had not been included in either the decision-making process or the consultation piece?
Very possibly. Because I'm not sure how everyone might be affected by changing the nature of this tool from more open, more, that you can use it to vent, to making it a little more structured.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that reduces access to anyone. Like perhaps they don't have another way to vent.
Sure.
But we found that, we definitely got the responses that were, I'm seeing an issue here. Here's my idea to fix it. Can you take it to the right people? And that's kind of our goal. But we also did get some feedback that was just, I'm angry, I'm upset.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even telling you why. I'm just mad at this one person.
Right on.
And so if we don't know, or I'm mad at this one department, and if we don't know why, we don't know how to fix it. So could we be creating some barriers by not allowing it to be a place to vent? I think people still could use it that way. It's just we tried to structure it so that they have to think a little more about what they want us to do. So
I think that's
I don't know.
totally
So
legit.
if anybody thinks that would be a barrier to them, I'd love to hear that.
I think that's totally legit. And thank you for asking that question, because I do want to put it out to the group to see if within this framework that Nancy just described, if there are any potential empathy gaps that might have been missed in this process of creating the survey and or re-characterizing the survey and making it a tool for more constructive implementation of ideas to improve versus this what it may have been used before, which was to vent and air out grievances, essentially, is what I heard. So yeah, very interested from the group to hear if folks see any empathy gaps there.
And there's a question from Amanda in the chat. Does the survey include open-ended questions?
Yes, it does. It provides, I think it's all open-ended questions. And there are 5, I believe. We were considering adding a 6th one, but I think we stuck with 5. And there are only 2 that are required. And you're not required, it still can be anonymous, but you can also share your name if you want someone to get back directly to you, or if you want to talk to someone directly. And then what was the other? Maybe adding, sorry, I need to put my glasses on. A line to ask if there's anything you would like to vent about. Good point, Monica. Yeah, definitely. We could think about that. And then Melissa has her hand raised, I believe.
Yeah, go ahead, Melissa. Melissa, did you want to share?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm sorry, I was speaking on mute.
Yeah.
And I was trying to type this in the chat as well, but it's a little wordy. I apologize. I'm trying to speak to it this way, but I don't know if I've taken this survey yet. And I don't know if this is going to be a meaningful question, but that essentially, is there anything in the survey or how it's worded that perhaps you could tell or could get help for an employee that perhaps has gone through the pathways, the channels to try to get a solution? That sort of nuanced space, right? Because the goal is that we're all going to be speaking for our own needs, aware of our own needs, and be able to feel comfortable saying that to whoever we need to say it to, especially in a professional setting, right? In a professional setting, there's supposed to be some modicum of where we're all here on the same team. So that was going to be my question. Like I said, I'm not familiar with the survey questions in any way, but that might be an empathy gap or something just to look at. But then also, who is receiving these and what are they doing with them? I know perhaps someone may list, this is who I'd like to get this in front of. I'm passing it to you for you to get in front of them. But maybe that receiver may also need to show it to someone else that the other person doesn't even know would be a resource or an opportunity.
Yes, and that was something we discussed adding, as well as making it part of the discussion process when people do give their names, and we can say to them, tell us, who you've escalated this to already. But I think that was the one we were back and forth about putting in the actual questionnaire. So I will add that to our discussion, my discussion with Erin and Dana as well. Because I think you've made some good points. And then we are going to create a process. My idea, and we still need to finalize this, is that they come into the EDIA Community of Practice team. They have to review them within X number of days. So there'll be members of that team who have access. And then answers will be posted for everyone. And if there's any personal information, it will be redacted. But again, we're still finalizing all of this, and I still have to run all this by Erin and Alicia, our HR director. But we definitely have thought about, how do we protect people's anonymity, but also make sure that they see that we are addressing their concerns. So
Thank
there,
you.
May I?
yeah,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Go ahead, Melissa.
I was going to say thank you so much, and thank you all for giving me a chance to ask that question.
Yeah, and I want to just be super transparent. Like, I was expecting to hear a process that was completely devoid of any type of connection or attempt to get to the partners. But obviously, Aaron and his team and you all really have this work as more committed versus interested. And so that process, for the most part, I thought probably was great. But I think the critical thing that folks pointed out in the chat, and then the folks that also spoke up, is that there is this critical element there that is missing, right? And you would only have known that by engaging with folks who could be affected but were not included in those decision making processes. I will tell you that it has not been my experience in most workshops and strategy sessions that I've had with other states where they have a system that is even remotely close to that, where they have a process where they're asking these critical questions about who could be affected, what might we be missing, and then this evaluation piece, Nancy, that you talked about, where your team actually went back and said, hey, actually, maybe we need to do these other things because we could be missing other folks' voices. That has not been my experience with other states. So I just want to give you all kudos for that. But the critical point here, right, is that we make decisions all the time that don't include the folks who are affected by these decisions. And just by including them could drastically improve the response mechanism that you get, right? Like, say you have this individual who wants to vent or has escalated an issue to the nth degree, and they feel like they have no outlet, right? Their alternative is to completely disengage from their job or, right, be deconstructive in their job. And that's not a culture that, right, we want to emphasize or influence. And so, like, these ideas about what are we missing clearly from the chat and from people speaking, um, even though we've changed the narrative, so to speak, of the survey, we acknowledge that there's still a need there for people to be able to voice their opinion, whether it be through venting or whether it be um, through a process of escalation to make sure that their problems get resolved. And so that's a really important piece to the work that we're going to be talking about today is just really being methodical about who's at the decision making table, who are we talking to in order to inform our decisions, and then who is being affected. And if those folks aren't at the decision making table or at least being consulted, we might want to rethink about how that decision making process is happening. Because when you do that, you actually avoid a lot more angst than you need to have when you include folks. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that here later. But I want folks in the Zoom poll, Aaron, if you could bring that one up, to think about in your role, who is most often excluded from decisions? And we'll take just a minute here. Okay, it looks like we have most of the participants answering. We get about 8 more seconds here, and then I'll close the poll. I think we have statistical significance to be able to have this next discussion. So 64, 65, 66 people answered. I'll end the poll and then hopefully we can share the results there for folks to review. And while you're reviewing it, well, first of all, can we all give Nancy a round of applause for having the courage to share? Thank you so much for doing that. But while you're reviewing the survey results, I wonder if you are recognizing anything about your decision-making process. And I want folks to be thinking about the outcomes of those decisions and who they affect and why it might be so difficult to include the groups that folks selected in the survey. And I see there's lots of, oh, those are the hand claps. Oh, that's so beautiful. So this kind of recognition, right, really prepares you, because I'll throw out a question to the group. What stops you from including these folks? Anyone can answer this. What stops you from including them? Go ahead, Patrick.
So I think that I think it's a challenge. First of all, I put community members, and I'm thinking about folks that are on Medicaid waiver, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the challenge is we tend to get a lot of the same folks that come to our stakeholder meetings, right? I think the challenge of expanding beyond that is a lot of these folks are really just trying to get by. They don't have time. They don't have time. They may be working 2 jobs. They may be getting home from work exhausted, trying to take care of kids, whatever. And so they don't have time to come to a meeting or even log on to a virtual meeting. Technology access is a whole different issue, but I don't really think there's one answer, but I do think it is these folks are just a lot of times just trying to get through the day. And that's kind of and so I guess my question is, if we keep, and I'm not saying we're doing this, I think there are a lot of creative people within HCPUF, but if you keep doing the same thing and you keep getting the same folks coming to meetings and you're not expanding your pool, what do we need to do differently to get to some of these other folks? And to me, that's kind of the $1 million question.
Beautiful question. And I just want to say, this is a foundational workshop. I can definitely work with groups if you're interested in thought partnering on those things. I see Aaron's hand up. I just want to finish this one thing. So the question that you asked, Patrick, that's the key, right? Like, that's the key. And then the question I would pose back to you is, what do you need to do? And how do you know what you would need to do if you don't talk to the people that you're trying to reach? Right? Like, right, if I have 2 jobs and I've been on Medicaid and I have 3 kids, I'm actually speaking truth. 2 jobs, been on Medicaid, 3 kids, I wouldn't have time. But there is a time that I have on Saturdays. I have time, or at 8:30 at night when my kids are asleep and all my work is done, I have time, right? I could tell you, hey, if you guys had a webinar or you had a meeting at 8 o'clock Central Time, I'd be there and I'd be willing to share, right? And so that's all a part of the process. But I want to give Aaron, go ahead, Aaron, give him his say.
Yeah, Patrick, really great insight. And I can share, when I first joined the department, stakeholder engagement was very siloed. And as we went over the years, and with health policy taking over and creating a stakeholder engagement section and a team that really wants to standardize and make sure that it's not just one group's sole responsibility to master the art of stakeholder engagement. We have hundreds of stakeholdering that takes place. And for those of you who are part of the stakeholdering, it's so important that you reach out to our stakeholder engagement team, because that's what they are solely responsible for doing, is ensuring that we have normalized and socialized and created best practices around what does it look like for stakeholdering, not just internally, but externally. And how do we reach out to the communities, to our partners, to our members in a new and innovative and empathetic, trauma informed way, to make sure that we're just not hearing from the same people, because we get the same feedback and we continue to do the same things that may or may not be right for a specific population. So really love that insight. And I hope that for those who might be on the stakeholder team, if you are here, please make it known so that we can reach out. But the section manager is Patrick Patyandi. So
Yeah, that's beautiful. There was another hand up also that I want to make sure we acknowledge before we move on. And it's okay if your question was already answered. What I was going to say, thank you for that, Aaron, is sometimes what prevents this connection that we're talking about is what I spoke about earlier, which is this disconnection from our social context, right? Like Patrick, you just really beautifully articulated what an empathy gap looks like. We are oftentimes, and I've been in government, we oftentimes orchestrate and coordinate things according to our context. And we don't think about the context of the people that we're trying to serve. And that creates these barriers and these empathy gaps. Clearly, Aaron just described, right? You have a mechanism in place to mitigate that. And so I offer to use it, but there's another piece to that. It's not just that you create the mechanism, right? How do you go into the spaces with our different contexts and actually have the conversation too? And that's what we're going to kind of get into next. And before we do that, though, just want you to reflect. No one has to answer or chat. Just what empathy gaps in your own work feels most important to address? What community or organizational voices have you been missing without realizing it? And just sit for a minute with recognition of this, not judgment. Sit with grace and forgiveness. The idea here is just to be aware and to recognize it. And then we can move forward with this next technique that I'm hoping you all can kind of take with you to have those in-person or virtual conversations with the people who you need to speak with. So moving on to the slate, understanding the slate framework, and the slate framework is essentially a tool that you all can use to reduce deficit-based thinking. So it's recognizing your own assumptions about specific groups and entities and relationships and people, either inside your organization or outside, and replacing those deficit-based assumption with more positive thinking about what could actually be happening in this person's life that could produce the outcome that we're seeing. And that's essentially what the slate framework is. So the first three pieces of slate is stop, right? I'll just share from a vulnerable position. There have been times, and there are times, and there are going to continue to be times where I meet a person or a group or a company, organization that I might be working with, and I come into that conversation with deficit-based thinking about who they are, what they do, what they believe, simply because my brain has been programmed to believe it, right? So if I see a white person or someone who has a lot of money, my brain is going to think automatically that this person is privileged, that they're arrogant, that they're going to want to have control and power. And that is my deficit-based thinking. So when I get that visceral reaction, and when you get that visceral reaction, the first step of Slate is to stop that deficit-based thinking and reflect on what you're thinking before you act. And this is not new. This is something that's been around for a number of years. A number of psychology studies understand the benefit of stopping your brain and intervening. But what I've added to like that process is we actually list down our assumptions. So I would say in my notes here, okay, this is what my visceral reaction was. I think this person is arrogant. I think they might not really understand who I am, and because of that, they're going to treat me differently. They might want to fire me, or they're looking to ways to fire me. So I'm writing all of this down. And what that does neurologically when you write it down is it actually allows your brain to disassociate from it. Because what you've done is you've said, this is something that has been programmed into me for whatever. And like I said, people come into their beliefs honestly. So these are beliefs that I have based on conditioning. And my job is to intervene on my heart's behalf. So I'm intervening on my brain because my heart actually wants to connect with this person. And neurologically, your brain will disassociate this from a continuing conversation. The next thing you do is you assume good intentions. You assume positive intent. So we're going to talk about a scenario, right, where community members don't show up to their primary care visits despite tons of work that you all have done, HCPF has done to invite them in and try to figure out, what's going on. Why aren't you doing these preventative measures to prevent your chronic diseases, et cetera? And our step, instead of using this deficit-based thinking, we're going to assume positive intent there. And then the next part of Slate is all about the empathetic nature of our communication and our interaction. So for the T, we want to tune into their humanity, which means recognizing what's important to them. And what this does is it not only fosters trust, but it actually tells people that it's not a self-indulging endeavor. This is a we endeavor that I want to collaborate with you, and it's important to me that I understand what's important to you. And then from that space, you can actually engage from empathy, which is the last part. And there's a secondary part to the E in Slate, which is you're elevating agreements as well. So you're engaging from empathy and you're saying, I understand that having a time that is conducive for you to meet with the state and our partners about this particular issue is important. It's actually really important to us, and we're trying to figure out how to make that happen, but we need your input into how to make that happen. So you're engaging from empathy and not a deficit based, like you don't care, this is your healthcare isn't a priority for you. You're not smart enough to read the notes and the newsletters and the emails we sent out, right? Like all of that is put to the side, and you're really engaging with what's important to them and what they hold dear, in terms of how to get involved with the particular subject matter that you are all trying to get across. And here's the elevate agreements. aspect of that. And so, in the chat, first of all, are there any questions with that? Just want to make sure I'm not going too far for folks. Does that make sense to anyone? And you'll be able to get these slides after the meeting today, but I just want to make sure there's no questions. Nope. Thanks, Gina. That's not what I meant to do. So let's go back here. So in the group chat, what's your immediate reaction to community members missing appointments? What assumptions do you make when that happens? What positive reasons might they have? And what's one barrier that they might face that we don't have in our personal or professional context? Are they alive? Phone number correct? Yeah, actually, these responses in the chat show that you all have a pretty advanced understanding of disregarding deficit-based thinking. And it's also showing that you have an ability to shift from that, right? And that's the important part, is recognizing what we might assume and then shifting to this positive aspect, with which lots of people have shared in the chat here. Gas money, car troubles, childcare, etc. Language accessibility barriers. These are all things that we know exist, right? And so when we approach our conversations and relationships with people who share different social contexts than we do, it's really important to keep these assumptions of positive intent at the forefront, right? And then engage with them, tune into their humanity, what's important to you, and then how can we make this better, right? What can we do to make this better for you so that you can attend your appointments timely, right? Do you need an Uber? Do we need to have a mobile clinic show up, right? Like, these are all questions that we would get to once we've established this empathetic connection. Yeah, I love these responses. They're great. Aaron, I'm wondering if I could, ask you how potentially assumptions in terms of deficit-based thinking might show up in your work, and then what ways you guys use to assume positive intent to kind of move forward with relationship building and trust building, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a great point. As I've shared with you, we have the AORTA framework, which stands for action, awareness, opportunities, reconciliation, and trust building. And where I see this really sits in reconciliation, because historically, the members that we serve have been harmed by our system with the deficit mindset for generations. And so what I believe we do really well is really taking a step back and having member engagement in different avenues, whether it's in the virtual space, if it's in person, if it's via email, if it's polling, and it's ongoing. And so the other piece that I believe that we do really well is our decisions are driven primarily by member experience. And if and when they're is an issue with time where we have to speed through or fast track certain decisions, member experience may not be at the top of the priority just based on the timing, but we have our staff, we have our leaders, we have our stakeholders who constantly remind us that member voice, member experience is and should be at the heart of all decisions. And so, although it could be the most challenging, because as Patrick had shared earlier, is that at times it could be just the same voices. And so, how do we diversify? How do we continue to tap into the trusted leaders in the various groups, populations, zip codes, territories, et cetera, that we can really have meaningful and co-created decisions? And so, I think using this model is super important for us to always go from the deficit to asset.
Right on. Yeah, I think I've said it a couple of times, right? Like this group seems to have a really good grasp on the process that is necessary in order to include. And sometimes like the strategic component gets in the way because that really takes so much time to plan, to understand, to go and reach out. So I totally get that. But I appreciate you sharing the aorta framework, which is something that I love, because I like to say like this is heart work. And I think that's something that you also say as well, right? Like most government work we're used to before I became an equity executive, I was used to how do we keep on the lights? What waiver do I need to fill out in order for the feds to approve it? I wasn't thinking about, hey, I'm filling out this waiver, but this waiver actually affects 2 million people. And what mechanisms am I using to actually find out what it is that they need versus me just quickly doing this so that we can get it approved and that we don't lose funding. And so like that's a process and it's a question, it's a challenge for a lot of state governments. And when you have processes and frameworks available to you that you can use, it's super it makes it easy. And that's one of the reasons why I created a lot of these things, because I needed to methodically think through what that process needs to look like. So I'm glad that you all are doing that, and it's a very positive, hopeful acknowledgement and recognition on the part of the state of Colorado. So I applaud you all for that. But there's still more work, right? We always can do better. The journey never ends. This isn't like we get to the apex and now we're done. Equity and justice is a never-ending journey. And so the idea is that we're always improving. We're always asking curious questions about who might be missing from this conversation that stands to benefit or stands to have a deficit from the outcome that we're creating. And so that conversation always needs to happen and is continuous. So I wanted to share some magic questions that really get to the heart of this empathetic curiosity when you're having conversations with folks who you potentially don't share the same social, personal, or professional context with. When we're assuming positive intent, one of the questions I love is, can you help me understand what's important to you most here? What's most important to you here? When we're trying to tune into humanity, how does this affect you? What would make this work better for you and your family? Tell me what you think about this. These are all questions that not only give you insight into the person, but it builds trust and it builds relationship because they know that you are dedicated to solving the problem based on their input and not our inputs. And then lastly, engaging from empathy first, what support would be most helpful? How would you have designed this to make it work for you? How can we work together on this? So Patrick and others who are kind of working on getting those folks who we can't reach, right? When you do reach them, these are some of the questions that you can ask them to get that perspective on how to make things work for them, how to meet with them in conducive environments, etc. So another group reflection here. What assumption patterns do you recognize in yourself? When do you most need to slate your reactions? And what would it feel like to engage from empathy first in your challenging relationships? So this is a reflection, but I'd like to hear from at least one or two folks to share kind of their thoughts on these questions.
I'll go again if you all don't mind. I apologize, but an assumption that I have, and this goes to that first survey question. Thank you so much for that first survey question. Because if I'm talking to someone and they know what they're talking about, how I'm going to approach it is very different than if they have an awareness about something, but they're literally in that first discovery stage of it. So one of my assumption patterns that I really have to check, that I recognize in myself, that I try to work on, is the topic that they brought to me, to figure out what familiarity they have, what they're trying to get to, before I just dive into solutioning or trying to get them resources or trying to help, because they may not really know what they're asking yet, to sort of help get to the question behind the question before getting to the coaching piece of it or the assistance piece of it.
Yeah, love that. It's super important we talk about sharing power a lot, but there's different types of power. Knowledge is one of them. And so if we're asking questions to folks and they don't have the requisite information in order to answer the question um, in an educated way, right? It's incumbent on us to provide that education. So Melissa, that's a super great point. That's really what we're trying to get to here is right. Like our assumptions might be, and particularly because of our professional context, like we use, I don't know about you guys, but when I was in Wisconsin, we probably had 150 acronyms that we just use flippantly, right? And most folks that we served wouldn't know what MCO meant to save their life, right? And so it's those underlying questions that we need to ask that you just pointed out, which is so crucial. So recognizing that place of power that you have in terms of knowledge, and then understanding that, hey, perhaps there's a link here that needs to happen before I actually engage in this other thing. I think that's super insightful, super crucial. There was another hand up.
Hi, I'll share. I had my hand up and then I second guessed myself. No, I was gonna say, I think sometimes for me, my struggle is um on the opposite side of like kind of being closer to the member rather than to like the leadership that oversees what I do. Like a lot of the work that I've done has been very focused on individuals. I've been a member. I've had experiences in my life that tie me more to that. And so sometimes my empathy needs to be built on the opposite side of helping people understand why it's important. So that's, yeah.
Totally. Same. same insight, or not same, similar insight there. It's crucial uh, to, we always say, or I always say, or people always say, meet people where they're at. And I'm not sure they really understand that when they say that. But Melissa's comment, and I'm not sure who was speaking prior. I'm sorry.
Amanda, sorry.
Amanda, your comment speak directly to that. Meeting people where they are and being intentional about that is really important. So I know we only got 15 minutes. There's a couple of things that I definitely want us to get to. You guys have been awesome. So I'm going to skip through a couple of these things and we're going to move to the bridge framework. So now that we've had this understanding, right, of awareness and recognition of our own bias and our own deficit thinking, and then going into situations and relationships with wiping the slate clean, assuming positive intent, listing our assumptions, assuming positive intent, and then tuning into humanity. There's another kind of step in this process, which is sometimes we can do all that and we'll still get pushback from folks. And oftentimes we'll get pushback from the people who are actually doing the work or who say that they're committed to the work. And so I developed this bridge framework, which again, I apologize for all of the wordiness on this slide. We can just simply pay attention to the blue square rectangles here. Building relationships and breathe, right? When we get into a situation where we know there's going to, or where we perceive potential anxiety or tension, right? It's really important for us to breathe and center ourselves. That's a biological function that's been scientifically proven. When you take a deep breath and exhale, you can center yourself and get back to what your intentionality is. And in this case, it's to build relationship. I know in my experience, sometimes I've gone into anxieties or tension-filled environments with anger, right? My intention was not to build relationships. My intention was to prove a point, show somebody they were wrong, or right, just be obstinate because I was mad, right? And so the bridge technique is a de-escalation technique to help you remove kind of those the emotions that would negatively impact relationship building and come into center with the emotions that would help you build relationships. And then again, similar to Slate, we're recognizing concerns and context. So we're asking questions like, or we're making statements like, I can understand your concern. The next step is identifying shared values. We both want effective programs that actually help people. We both want all folks in Colorado to have equal access to quality health care and to be able to thrive and live long lives. The next step is directing toward collaborative outcomes. And so the key question here is, what if we could do that? So say, for example, and we're going to get into this in a second, someone is really concerned about, let's say, they don't want to work on Saturdays. And we've determined right through communication with the community that that's really the optimal time for them to meet, but they don't want to work on Saturdays. And the key question, but they do want people to have access to be able to inform programming. The key question here is, what if we could solve both problems, right? And so instead of meeting them in their obstinance with, well, you should just be able to get on board because this is what the people want, we approach them with the key principle of, what if we could solve both of these problems together, right? And what would it take for you to be able to do that? What would it take for you to be able to meet on Saturdays? And then the next step is generate solutions and small wins, which is really just you take a small step and see what happens, see what learns, and then the next step is you establish the next steps and then evaluate kind of what came out of that agreement between you two. And this is the bridge technology or technique. It's in your reference framework document that you have. And now what I want to do is actually engage. So the whole group, I want us to all engage in this role play scenario where our fearless leader, Aaron, is going to be the resistant colleague. And we are going to use the bridge technique to work through his issues and his quote unquote complaints. So, Aaron, I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jamal. Love the work. I think it's important, but we just have a lot of competing priorities right now. And didn't we already take care of this? I mean, everyone has health equity.
So, how do we, this is to the group, how do we create psychological safety first with Aaron? Anyone have any suggestions?
I'm curious. I want to know more about it. I just want to know why he feels that way. So I understand his assumptions first.
Amanda, would you say that your first reaction is defensive, frustrated, understanding, or curious?
Curious.
Right on. Anyone else? Go ahead, Sandy. You're still on mute. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I've got my headset on. I my immediate response was I was feeling shut down.
Mm,
Blocked, closed off. Yeah. I was feeling like the impact is like, oh, I hit this wall and we just started
mm,
the conversation. So that's just
mm.
my knee-jerk reaction. Thanks.
Sandy, can I follow up with you?
Sure.
Uh, did you hear any legitimate concern Aaron was expressing?
No, but I was having a personal reaction to that first. So I would have had to have take a breath, pause, and then get into my curious mode.
Understood.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Did anyone hear a legitimate concern from Aaron? Go ahead, Amanda. Or go ahead,
Concern
Ann.
about, oh yeah, go ahead, Emily.
I think that, you know, at especially right now, like feeling like there's already so much going on and so many priorities, like that feels really valid to me. So I feel like that's where I would start. Like we do have so many things that we are trying to accomplish, and this can be one of the things that we focus on right now, and that doesn't take away from all the other work, that you're doing outside of this conversation.
Mm,
And maybe we can talk about how we can navigate getting all of those priorities accomplished. But this one still is, valid and important right now.
mm. Love it. Go ahead, Cody.
Yeah, I think just honestly, just supporting everything that's been said, but we all think of these things differently. It seems like the statement that was just displayed kind of creates an excluded middle or a false sense of the idea that we need to pick just one thing, that we can't be looking at the myriad things that all are necessary in order to help individuals meet their needs, their social determinants of health, and just logically statements like that, when they're phrased that way, kind of creates this assumption or position that we have to pick just one thing, and also maybe runs the risk of invalidating the personal experience of the people that are reporting that they don't feel like their needs are being met. And it's easy to see how maybe sometimes statements like that can mean something totally different or benign, but honestly, on the face of it, can put this frame everything in a way that makes it seem like it's, again, there's a yes or a no answer, there's an excluded middle, and can make people feel like they're not being heard when their lived experience is demonstrating something different than what that statement might conclude.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, Cody, Sandy, and Emily, you all really just went through this recognition piece. And Emily, when you spoke, you actually talked about this shared value piece. So his concern is there's lots of time and resources for health equity. Like I think, Aaron, you said, didn't we already do this? Right. Um, and so your concern is that as a government entity, you have lots of priorities that are crucial to the facilitation and administration of benefits and services that help prolong and improve the quality of life of Coloradans. Like that's a legitimate concern. And I think one of the persons that spoke to that concern. And then the next kind of step is, what is the identified shared value? I'm sure Cody, Sandy, and Emily, you could agree that that is a shared value, that it's important that we address all the aspects of healthcare, even though I would probably argue that health equity is embedded in all aspects. That's neither here nor there. Like that's a totally different conversation. But for the purposes of this scenario, we could say like we definitely agree that all of healthcare needs to be addressed and all of the different programmatic areas in our work needs to be addressed. Now, the question would come to how do we direct toward collaborative outcomes? So if his concern is time and resources, what is something that we could say to Aaron that could direct him towards a collaborative outcome where we're both achieving health equity outcomes and we're also meeting these other programmatic requirements or obligations that our team has? Anyone want to speak to that? Go ahead, Cody.
I appreciate it. I think for me, it would come down to asking what he defines health equity as and where he's seeing that it's being currently met, and maybe trying to figure out where we might be misaligned in how I might define health equity, or how somebody who feels like they're not getting sufficient health equity might feel like their needs aren't being currently met. So I guess in other words, just trying to figure out where the details are and what maybe that statement was really saying beyond just the obvious.
Let's assume that his concern was the efficiency. Maybe he really doesn't believe that health equity is quote unquote done. But he's really just concerned about the number of resources and efficiency.
I think that would be the perfect segue to the conversation of maybe refining the terms and just coming to an understanding over exactly where the gaps are and the solutions that we could find to meet them.
Understood. And that's a perfect way to say, right? Like the conversation would go something like, totally understand your concern. We know that we're all stretched thin, resources, funding, we know the current environment at the federal level. And this is something that is both important, but also takes time and resources. So how could we potentially solve both of those problems? Could potentially, what if, one of the questions you could ask is, what if we made our health equity work more efficient. Would that work for you, Aaron? Aaron, what if we made our health equity work more efficient?
Jamai, this is the first time someone ever asked me that question. And it's been years. And so listening to what Cody was saying, Amanda, um, Emily, Melissa, and yourself and others, I'm kind of feeling seen in that it's okay to be an outlier, but I also want to ensure that we embed it in all spaces. So if we can make health equity more efficient, and I'm going on the website now, it looks like we have a SharePoint site that outlines all the work that we've been doing. I haven't seen it prior to this conversation, so I'm just making assumptions. So I will commit myself to talking to the specific people to learn more about how I can be more efficient in the work.
Right on. So could we do this? Could we meet again in a couple weeks after you've kind of thoroughly reviewed that? And if you see any concerns in terms of like resources and timing and maybe some efficiencies that we can achieve, can we just talk about those and then you can or I can bring them back to our team and really focus on how we can make this more efficient so that you're not feeling that this work is kind of rolling over you and that you can't actually do your job. Is that something that you think we can do?
Absolutely. I think I have some projects that I can move around to make this work.
Awesome. And that's really how the bridge framework works. And I appreciate all of the folks that participated and shared. It was perfect because you really went down that list on your own, right? I didn't even have to kind of manage that. You kind of already had it figured out. So I really appreciate the folks that participated. And I know we're at time and I want to make sure I'm respectful of that. There's a couple more slides that I can share or Aaron can share afterwards. And then if folks want to engage later during the off hours, they can schedule time with me and we can meet and talk through any particular issues that you might be having with your teams. But I don't want to take up any more time, Aaron. I apologize that I went over.
Well, this is great. Jemai, first and foremost, thank you so much for pouring into us. The Slate Bridge Arrive framework are incredible. This has been recorded, so folks who weren't able to attend will be able to tap into on demand. So this is day one of a part 2 series. So we have all staff today and tomorrow managers. So if there's any managers on this call, please be prepared for tomorrow. If there are no managers on the call today, don't worry. Tomorrow you will be filled with all of the things that are needed to continue to be a great leader in this space. Just want to thank you all for your commitment to the work. It might look different, it might feel different, but the impact remains the same. Continue to do what's right. And until next time, we'll see you all later. Everyone, take care. Peace.